I think I should introduce today's speaker, Doug Luckie. We're very pleased to have Doug here. Doug has given, this is I think the third time he's been giving this talk. And as you can see, it's very popular, and there's a good reason for that, and I'm sure we'll find out. And so I'm going to let him get to it.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Doug, and one of your first tasks is to get in the little manila folder that was just handed, or that's just laying in front of you, and pull out the index card. So you'll do this. On the front of the index card, you're going to put your name in this sort of style, and on the back, you're going to put sort of what you would like to learn today. So that's your first task. And there is an empty seat right here with a folder in front of it. And there's an empty seat right there with a folder in front of it for anyone that actually would like to sit and participate rather than spectate. Yeah, you can use whatever you'd like. So front is name, big letters for first name. Back, I want to learn something. So this is, how many people of you on the first day of class do something similar where students write their name and some sort of prompt, they answer some question? So that's what we're doing. We'll do a lot of things that are just modeling the classroom, so you get to be a student and look at it from that perspective. So all my classes I do this, I use this just index card. And I don't know what the question varies, whatever I think is a good question. But always do it on day one. Once you guys feel like, all right, I have successfully spelled my name, feel free to maybe shove all along the table to the very end, and Janan will snag them, and we'll make a pile of all the cards. He wants to learn something on the back. He actually literally wrote, I would like to learn something. Yeah, we're all going that way. Right, cool. So there's probably only two things that I think would be super helpful for you to remember from today, and there'll be a lot of blah, blah, blah. But this is number one. So everybody does this, right? We collect these things. Sometimes they're written in different forms. I always put them on this deck of cards. But Carl Smith explained to me a long time ago that this is a much more powerful element than we usually use it for. So we often use it on our own to review like the students in our class, how to spell their name, what they're interested in, those sort of things. But the deck itself is probably one of my favorite tools for teaching. So throughout the semester, at every class, during every talk, I use it to randomly pick students to answer questions. And the Carl Smith approach, and he's a very thoughtful fellow, Carl Smith, his point was always that you should shuffle the deck in front of them, and then you put it down in front of a student. You walk away, and then the student just cuts the deck, and they announce who's been chosen. And if you have a microphone, which Janan will use a microphone today to run around to make sure we practice what we do in the classroom also, then it's not your fault. You didn't purposefully pick them. So, but it also changes the dynamic in the room. So, and I always talk to the students about it on the first day too. I'm telling them what we're going to do, that we'll randomly pick from this deck of cards, using it in this exact same manner. And then I ask them, like, well, why do you think this might be good for you, for your learning? So, take a moment, think to yourself, why do you think this technique might be good for the purpose of student learning? Chat with your neighbor, say hello, my name is so-and-so. I will chat with you now. Go ahead, take a second. Just introduce yourself. In 60 seconds, you're going to get picked. So just prepare for what you'd like to say even if you'd like to write it down so you don't get verklempt and you can actually say it. So 60 seconds, and then we'll pick from the deck randomly, choosing one of you to respond. Sort of like, why are we using the cards? That was the original question. Why are we doing this? All right. So go ahead, take a moment, decide. Quiet. We're ready. All right. So is it Anthony?
Yes.
Anthony is splitting the deck, and I'm walking away. I'm going to mic him up when he picks the name. Oh, take a shot at it. Yeah, and so that's the person you chose?
The class
Good job. All right, you've been chosen. So now mic him up. Yeah, mic him up. Thank you, Anthony. So why do we use the cards? So why do you think I use these cards to increase student learning? How do you think it might affect that? Why would one do that?
I don't know.
All right. Talk to a neighbor. Hey, neighbor, want to help out?
Feel free.
I think it would help the student, the
Mic yourself
instructor,
up.
it would help the instructor to learn the students. It would get the students on the first page the first day that they're there to learn something, not to do other things. And it helps the instructor know what the students want to get out of the course. Cool.
Other thoughts? Random. Anyone volunteering? Yeah, over here.
I think that it keeps them like alert or prepared to answer.
Right, alert is good. Anything we can do to maintain alertness longer. What else? So in the normal classroom that doesn't happen, right? So in the normal classroom we do what I did. So we actually pick volunteers that raise their hand. What's the negative part of that? Like when you're a student, how did that go?
The same 5 kids answer over and over again, and if you single out other kids, they sort of feel really embarrassed and they just clam up on you.
Yeah, there's that whole thing where there's like 5 students that start becoming the people that answer questions the entire semester. The other students sort of are comfortable with that because they get to kick back a little. And many of us as students did the same thing. We were very quiet people, and we would just think in our mind, yeah, the answer is this, da, da, da. And then we just waited to see if it turned out that way. It was like a mental clicker system. We would just commit to an answer, and then we'd be like, got it. But you know, there's actually data, which is surprising, that a student in the classroom who speaks aloud the exact same sentence, instead of thinking it silently to themselves, will actually learn more and retain more. So actually vocalization does increase learning. But yeah, so that's one, and so this is the exact same discussion I have in the class, and the students actually immediately get that. They're like, yeah, there's only like 4 people in my class of 120 chemistry right now that answer all the questions, and the rest of us are cool with that. So, but yeah, so it does create a feeling, like even in the room here, did you have a feeling like, oh, I might be chosen, right? So a colleague of mine, Scott Freeman, did this at a conference once. Started talking about stuff, and he said, I have everybody's names here, I'm just going to pick. Everybody was like, whoa. You know, like, here's a question, how does that graph mean anything? You're like, holy crap, I have to pay attention. All right, and I wish I was before he said this. But yeah, so, and that's the other thing, right? So you have to, and so Carl Smith says, have them choose and give them forewarning, that whole talking, and give them a resource, like somebody next door. Like if you know nothing, you have the person next to you to help you out. But yeah, so, and do that whole, in 60 seconds, it's gonna happen. And even the whole write down your answer so you don't go, eek, and then you're like, I don't know what I was thinking. You lose your mind, right? All right, so anyways, so that's the one of 2 things. So that's number 1 of just 2 things today that I would encourage you to seriously consider trying out, even in a teeny tiny class of 8. Because if any of us have ever observed even a class of 8, the same thing happens where only a few students talk, and there is that issue that if they know that anybody can be picked at any time, not only alertness but preparation level, like, oh, so you can't take a mental vacation for 15 minutes in a class and then kind of recover from it because you don't have to worry about being put on the spot. So, but it is a powerful thing, and you have to kind of use it sparingly, just like we were doing it here. So, cards. So that was first day of class, so I have the cards, but then I use them throughout the semester. My classes are between 80 and 120 students, and I'm a little bit fanatical about the cards, so like Janan and I and Sam or other TAs will go through and find out if any students did not put their card in the deck, and we'll just make one for them and put it in. They might have been absent, or they might have been that somebody told them, don't fill out card, something like that. But yeah, so then it's like all equal and fair play. I also tend to return everything to the deck. So there's a chance you'll be chosen again during this class period kind of thing, instead of, good, I'm done, I don't have to think anymore. Anyways, so the cards is one thing. So on day 2, now we'll do the second thing we do at the very beginning of day 2, which is this. So take your actual folder and use it as a tool. So pull all the junk out of your folder, your manila folder, and on both sides of your folder, make it into a name placard, like when you're at the UN and you're important and your name is in front of you. So create the same sort of thing using that big marker and your own ingenuity with this piece of paper. So the students have things where they'll write career interest in the top corner, dream job, and they actually will be formed in permanent groups, so they'll establish a group name, things like that. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can just go with name. So big name thing, and put it on the front and the back. So then people in front of you and in back of you and beside you can see your name. So when they turn to talk to you, they're like, hey, Charlie, I know you. You have a name, which is cool. So go ahead and do that. But yeah, so sometimes I just use the cards, because if you just use the cards, that does also get places where you're calling names and you're finding names out. So just as Scott mentioned, you'll actually learn their names because you'll see them when they, but this is a trick that Diane Ebert May came up with, or at least told me about, which enabled, like in a classroom of 400, that you could know everybody's name on the first day. I tend to delay it to the second day because I don't want too much going on, like one card's on day 1 and then we'll do this on day 2, right? But suddenly you can call on people and by just like going, hey, Gail, what do you think about, because it's name time right there. So anyway, so that's another cool technique, almost similar, but yeah, if you can pull it off, it is nice. But yeah, like last fall, I taught a larger class than usual, so I used this as just a crutch. And then they just used it all. At the end of the class, they gather it in a pile, and we put it in this black box I have over here on that. And so they just sort of file. But it's just a tool. All right, cool. All right, so that was just warm-up, just like in class. So this class, I think, or this this workshop, is called Active Learning. We already did the hand in your index card. I think Active Learning is sort of just a short version of what probably is really active and cooperative learning, which are kind of different things, and when used together are really good. But yeah, so that's me, and I'm from both the Department of Physiology upstairs and Lyman Briggs College across the way. And the idea of active and cooperative learning is actually not to just engage students. Some of our students don't need anything to be engaged, but it's actually to engage all students or a greater proportion of students in the room. So we are people that were students that really were successful under almost all conditions of teaching. So we're kind of mutants like X-Men. We had the superpower to stay awake, maintain attention in lengthy, horrible, uninteresting, uninspired experiences. But we always have to remember that our experience is not the experience of everybody in our class, probably far from it. So these techniques can help. So the workshop goals is generally there's just 2 that get a little bit of an understanding about these terms and techniques and actually experience them for yourself rather than just have somebody talk to you about them alone. So we'll start with a pop quiz to engage you. So you're going to write down your answers, and there's just 2 questions, which is literally, what is active and cooperative learning, and why do people use these teaching approaches? So take a moment individually, find some sort of writing instrument somewhere. Feel free to write on any product of paper or whatever you like, whatever you might have brought. All right, I think 60 seconds is past. So I'm going to make Chad pick or split the deck, and it's not my fault. So mic up Chad so we can...
All right, Anthony Cugnado.
Oh, Anthony, actually, yeah. So you got revenge, right? Yeah, right on. Thanks. Yeah, there you go. So thoughts about this?
Sure. Active and cooperative learning, well, that's where students actually participate with the lesson, so they add content into the class, perhaps, and actually help teach each other information.
All right.
My general understanding.
Good. Active participation, teaching each other. Kevin, any additional embellishments you can throw in there that you might have? I'm picking on your group of 4 here.
Just for the first question or also the second one?
Whatever you got.
Well, I thought that Anthony had a nice point that for one of the reasons to use these approaches is that then the teachers can actually be gaining sort of new insights, maybe that, staying up to date on things that the students might be finding out with projects or things like that.
Right. It is cool to challenge the students to teach you or to think that's what they should do, bring new information. Good. Yeah, and then chalk bullet point number 2. So we'll pick again, and we'll let Marty split the deck for additional thoughts about why people use this.
Jenny Candelosi?
Jenny?
No, sorry.
All right. So Jenny right there. Thank you, Marty. Any additional ideas?
So I'm hoping that instructors use these approaches because they work, and students, I'm thinking that maybe students learn more by actually engaging in the lesson instead of just having you tell them information.
Good. Yeah. Solid. We're hoping this causes more learning. Number 1. Yeah, the other thing, so we're doing this weird thing where we're using a mic. Thank you, Jenny. Why are we doing that? And because why do we do this in a classroom, even a small classroom? Well, I tend to have an 80-person classroom be my small classroom. But yeah, so what's that tell the students if you use a microphone when they speak?
They're equally as important as you are.
Yeah, they're equally important. And that's the thing, just like you were talking about a messed up classroom with micro desks only the size of popcorn, all our rooms are so teacher focused, right? They're all about miking us up. They even, often, even in this room, there's like this fortress of solitude lectern area. If anyone's seen what's on the other side of this giant monitor, and then whenever they upgrade this monitor, it'll probably get bigger just because they don't make one that small anymore. So it's just going to get giant, and it's all like, I don't know, the Wizard of Oz back there. So in our classroom, in fall, how many people teach a class that's reasonably large, that's maybe 50, 80, 100, 200? In fall, it's all hot in that room, and they've got the fans buzzing, and you can't hear a thing. And one fall, we were trying to do like a journal club where they were reading and talking about figures, and it was just a nightmare. But if we got mics, then all of a sudden it was good, because a good solid mic, and bam, everyone's hearing what the students are. But it does promote that idea that their voice is just as important as yours. It also is cool just to hear what they say. Because what's the technique we're supposed to use when a student speaks, but it wasn't clear to the rest of the class what they were saying? Yeah, repeat it. And if a student is long-winded, you're like, oh, I don't even remember the first 5 sentences, right? And then you're trying to restate it in an elegant way and capture what they said, and by the end of which they're just going, that's not what I said. Now, there's a cool factor with that. You can take an answer that's bizarrely not connected to the question and craft it to bring it back in to be a good answer. But it might be more efficient to just have a mic, right? But yeah, so anyways, so those are different thoughts. Yeah.
So, me and my group were wondering, what do you do, like, if you draw a card and no student answers?
Yeah, we do this in class too.
Well, me and my group were discussing what happens if you draw a name out of the cards and nobody answers.
So yeah, what would you do if you draw, good question. If somebody splits the deck and they yell Ginny and nobody answers, what are the possible scenarios? They might not.
Actually, it's not there.
Yeah, could be absent and or hiding. So the absent one is going to happen, right? And so if they're absent, then you just split the deck again, right? The hiding one is interesting because normally you would have thought no one is ever going to, everybody's going to hide. But they always sit with their friends and their friends are all like, and so there's not much hiding. So, but yeah, so it tends to happen in a funny way. Because like when I first start this, I thought, as soon as somebody knows what's up, they're just going to be like, that person's not here, that person's not here. But it never happens because their friends are like, there they are. So, but yeah, people be absent, just check another name. And some people drop, right? Oh, I guess they pick another name. Yeah, Karen.
What happens when your students can't pronounce like foreign names?
When students cannot pronounce foreign names, they're like me, same issue. They destroy it like I would have. Cool, they did. Right? Yeah, and the student getting that name is like used to being destroyed, and they're like, yeah, you're talking about me, right? All right. Yeah. But yeah, but those challenges occur, but it's the same for us, right? Otherwise, we're always on the spot. I'm going to say this wrong, so it's probably okay, right? But yep.
So I just wanted to add that to me, I was very attracted about active teaching because it includes different ways of learning. So not just oral learning, but visual and kinesthetic and everything, right? So not everybody learns with the same sense, I guess, or way of learning. And using active teaching can include all different types of learning. So the diversity is what really attracts me.
Right, so it's Norma?
Cecilia, yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's a good point too, that active learning might enable people to learn who are stronger at different styles per se. We know learning styles as a thing has kind of been debunked, but everybody has different strengths and some things they need to strengthen that are weak. But some people are really good at remembering what someone has stated. So like even during the exam, they can hear the professor saying the words. Other people it's visual, but it's all just which one are you strong with now. It's like you can work all your different techniques to improve your strength. But yeah, so it's more diverse, engaging all students and maybe increasing learning for all students or a greater proportion. But yep, good. Yeah. Rhonda.
Yes, Cecilia used some terminology that I found really interesting. She said active teaching, and that was part of the notes that I made about this, is that it's not just the active learning, it forces us to be active teachers, which sometimes we might fall into habits of where we're not as active as teachers as we should be, and now we have to be equally engaged in this whole process as well.
Yep, good point. Thank you, Rhonda. Anyone else have some thoughts? Yeah. Maren?
So the other thing that I think is important is thinking about why the students are actually here and what we're preparing them for. And so most of the undergrads at MIT are not going to go off and be professional students for the rest of their lives. They're going to get actual jobs, and in those jobs they're going to have to learn by doing. They're going to have to work in cooperative groups. They're going to have to be able to articulate their ideas and teach other people. And so by using these techniques, we can actually teach them more than just the content of whatever course we're teaching.
Right. Yeah, right. So you can make the case to your students that in your career, you're going to be challenged in many cases to work in groups, whether you like it or not, and a lot of the events that occur in real life will require a lot of discussion and this process. Yeah, so I think, yeah, there are a number of good reasons, and those are the reasons you need to communicate to your students so they can buy into why we're doing this, because it's not like a common experience that every class is like this. So, good. Yeah, and the mic is kind of questionable. So I think you have to like mug up right to the mic. It looks like it's a little bit like kicking back a quiet mic. Scott, try Try out the mugging up into the mic thing.
So Doug, what
Even
happened?
closer, could you put it even closer? Because we started to pick you up at the very beginning.
Oh, okay.
You could just broadcast your voice.
You're a rock star.
So, Doug, you have audiences approaching 500 students. They're pretty intimidating from speaking anything. Any ways around that?
Well, right. I mean, I would still try personally. If I'm putting in like the big chemistry lecture over there, it's painful for me to not do all this stuff because just this works for me. So I would try everything. I would throw every little trick and thing I could at them, but I would continually try to have the beginning of the class would always be a discussion about why we're doing stuff and what we're doing today and things like that to try to buy in. Some students would buy in big, no matter where they are in the giant room, other people won't. But if you randomly pick and somebody runs up with a mic that's maybe a little louder than that mic, then that's kind of cool. Suddenly that giant room, you could be in the back reading the paper and you're called and they're like, what? And then your friends are laughing at you and suddenly you have to, so next time you come in, you're like, I'm never gonna read the paper in the back room of this again. But yeah, I would try to go big. But at Diane Abrams May, that was where she made her, in Arizona State, they did classes of 400 to 600 and they published papers. So you can actually look up Diane Abrams May papers from a decade ago or two. Yeah, Ty.
Are you usually doing this, sorry. Are you usually doing this in conjunction with like clicker responses where you're getting feedback from every student?
Yeah, exactly. Clickers are very helpful tools. Yeah, good point. And if we get to our clicker questions, you get to use your cell phones to text in your answers today as a workaround. So everybody suddenly has clickers who has a cell phone that's active. So yeah, and I use cell phones in my class these days as the clickers in the same way we will. But yeah, clickers are it's like probably an invention in the last 2 decades that was the most close to a successful dissemination tool that's gone a lot of places. People have become critical about how they're used, but they're around, maybe more than anything else we've seen. And so it is a nice step toward something. If you have clickers, then doing active learning and think, pair, share, which is what we've done so far, where you think about something and talk to someone and share your answer, those are all much more doable because people can click in. But yeah, so good question. So I'm going to show you something that maybe many of you have seen before, and we'll see how good the audio in the room is. So it's a short movie. So what they did in this movie is they went to a graduation and they asked very fundamental basic questions that are sort of freshman level or sophomore level in physics, in chemistry, in biology, things like what causes the phases of the moon, what causes the seasons, all these really fundamental things. And so I think this is an intriguing little snippet of film for everybody to see. Let's see if we can get it to work. Not yet. There is sound coming though. Maybe. There was a mute button. Try again. See if it initiates. Source, thin air, so the source is good. It's on the right person. Technology, baby. What else? It's not muted. All right, so 60 seconds and we'll pick a name.
Rhonda Crackle.
That's me. I don't know I need the mic or not. I'm pretty used to talking about it. Okay, what we were talking about, my partner and I, is that, and we came up with the exact same thing, is that the students had really just memorized facts for the next exam, and maybe never had a true understanding and processing of the information from their classes.
Cool. All right. Memorized facts. Never really processed the information. Anyone else that wants to volunteer? Thoughts? Yep. Rosa over here.
I'm pretty loud.
Good.
I don't need it. So what I think is that it's not only to blame the student. I mean, the instructor needs to find out what they know. And if you have a student that have a previous misconception, you need to find a way to deconstruct what they know to build the new concept. And so I was talking to Jessica right now that something that we have seen in our research group is that students, for instance, think that the CO2 the plants use for photosynthesis, it's absorbed by the roots. And so you need to find out that at the beginning before you start explaining them photosynthesis, because yes, they're going to learn from the photosynthesis from the book, but when you ask them the key question, where do you think that CO2 came from? And then you're going to find that they are going to still think, oh, it comes from the soil.
Right, and in fact, the little movie that we were hoping you'd watch, actually they asked graduates that particular question in the clip that we were going to show you. So there's a lot of questions, and that was just the clip. The clip is they actually walk up to the graduate with a little seed and then a giant chunk of a tree trunk, and they hand the graduate the seed, and the graduate's like, yeah. And they're like, how does this little thing get converted? Where's all this mass come from to go from that to this? And they actually say things like, well, water from the ground, food from the ground, sunlight from the sky. So they write, and it's all the stuff they would have said when they were 8. You know, and it makes sense because we explain our world in intuitive ways. We know when we walk in like a field, bunnies eat and dogs eat grass. We eat food. The earth is sort of, we water plants. It must be coming up. The food, we put Miracle Grow in, right? That's got to be the food. So all the food for plants it's intuitive. It comes up from the ground. So in science, many of us teach things that are not intuitive and that contradict an intuitive explanation. And so we sort of know going in that it's probably not the easiest thing for them to actually retain and learn and embed into their system of understanding about the world. So it looks like, yeah, they'll take that information, the CO2 from the air, and they'll memorize it for the exam. They'll do well on the exam, especially if they're MIT or Harvard students. They're really good at exams. But then it'll go away, and then when you hit them at graduation, they just go back to their 8-year-old self. So it seems like it's hard to get new information to stick. So they have to actively work it into the existing explanation sort of matrix they have cognitively. Otherwise, it's just a temporary add-on that gets discarded and they go back to their normal thing. Students even do that on purpose, right? After exam 1 is over, and that material is not apparently on exam 2 or the final, they literally say, okay, I got to clear my mind out, get rid of all that information to create room for the new stuff. So there's actually a kind of a intentional shedding that occurs. So let it go. But yeah, so that's an interesting topic. So a number of the helpful quotes that I've seen. So Kathleen Fisher talks about what Rosa pointed at, that students have a lot of pre-existing knowledge. They have their own answers already for a lot of what you're going to do. And so they're not the blank slate we sort of would like them to be, or we'd like to think that we can write on the chalkboard or whiteboard much like we write on their mind and hope it sticks. So I'll just give you 3 quotes that I thought were kind of cool. So Novak uses a terminology called meaningful learning to try to separate that from memorization or learning that goes away just as fast as it comes in. So learning that authentically you can add it to your explanation system. So it requires connecting new information into your existing system. In fact, one of the best things you can tell your students is if you're in a class that you're never upset, you're never angry, you're never pissed off about what you're hearing, you aren't learning anything. Because if you learn something that disrupts what you currently understand, it is uncomfortable. And so a class being uncomfortable is good. It should actually have like, wait, that doesn't make sense going on, instead of just like, great, cool, thanks. So the last one, I like Larry Spence. That was a cute comment. I was just like, when I first read this, I visualized like Socrates. What are we talking about? It's like, it's been bad ever since. But yeah, so it does make sense that as like in our research labs, in our work, in the field work, when we have 2 students or 1 student, the verbal back and forth is pretty effective as an apprenticeship or an internship. But when we blow that scale up, it works less well. So Carl Smith's wife did these illustrations for him. And so he represented visually, this is traditional lecture, our idea or hope that knowledge is being put through a funnel into the student. And he said, but it doesn't quite work. And so that there's some sort of traditional leakage where it just sort of goes through. And Carl talks about that active learning is an attempt to slow the leakage to some degree, to have the student work with the knowledge, do something with it, so less leakage. And his wife also illustrated Carl's version or vision for what cooperative learning was by this representation, which is disturbing. So maybe we're learning something if we're disturbed. I don't know. There's an analysis. You start going, what is going on in this particular art? But yeah, so lots of people doing active learning and sharing their thoughts and hopefully teaching each other, as was mentioned, and teaching the professor in the best case scenario. So it's kind of a cute visual representation. I do think, once again, we're X-Men, we're mutants. We had the ability to maintain attention. I mean, look, we're doing it right now, right? We can maintain attention for quite a long period of time with someone talking at you. But you know our students don't. Our students, we're lucky if our students are the yellow line. I mean, if they maintained attention that long and it only went down that far, I think it's more pulsatile up and down and up and down, where it goes down to 0 and then it comes back. So to some degree, the idea of active and cooperative learning is alertness and maintaining, trying to get them back up attentively, even just to 70% is awesome. So, but yeah, I think of it in that way. And this is the Carl Smith bookends model, which I find very helpful, which is because I was used to, pure lecture experience, and Carl Smith is like, why don't you just put something in the middle? And eventually, maybe you'll even have the ability to put 2 events to break up the lecture, even just a 50-minute lecture. So myself and my colleagues, we just started working on having one thing that happened in the middle of lecture, some exercise where students talked to each other, made graphs, did predictions, something that would break it in half. And as we got more and more interesting exercises that we could actually populate at least one of every lecture of a semester, and we had surplus, then we started working in a second one. So I think this is a nice model. It makes sense to me that you can attempt to create moments. Whether you do think, pair, share, ideally with clickers is a good scenario. Whether you use this for that kind of accountability issue where anybody could be called to enable yourself to actually achieve this kind of thing, where you might just be able to have a quick 5-minute discussion or clicker question that breaks up a lengthy lecture. So at least there's subparts. Because then you have that whole, they only have to pay attention for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then their curves going down and you bring them back up. But yeah, so Carl Smith's approach, this appealed to me, and he called it the bookends approach, where it's like books stacked together. So for anyone, and this is sort of a teaching 101 type workshop, for anyone in the room that's like I was, coming in and mostly can lecture and is curious about, but what little things I could do, like the title, like what little things could I do? The idea of targeting this kind of model I think is helpful. Any questions about the idea? Yeah, Cecilia.
So the previous slide you show.
You have to do the yell into the mic apparently.
So the previous slide you show 70% of attention. So that means that 30% of your students never pay attention, not even for a minute.
Yeah. It's how many people here have been teaching a while and started to confront the reality of what's going on, right? So and actually it's interesting. So once you've been teaching for a while and like for instance, if you interview your students about stuff they should have learned, then you confront the reality. Where even the stuff you spent 3 weeks on and quiz them again and again, if you sit down with a student just like a week later and ask them, no. So getting a little bit of knowledge is hard. It's challenging. That's why we're supposed to have multiple tiers, 100 level, 200 level, 300 level, 400 level, theoretically at the university where people revisit things again and again. The university tends to cut out the middle and then make sure we never cover the same thing again from an efficiency point of view, which destroys the ability of the system to reinforce. But yeah, so I think, my personal belief is in lecture, 10% success. So if you lecture with no break, maybe 10% of the students hear you, and at the end of the semester, any student in the room might know 10% of what you talked about in the entire semester. And the thing is, it's depressing, but it's liberating too. If you understand that lecture is so ineffective, then you don't feel burdened by it anymore, right? Because you have to cover. So we are always challenged with coverage. We got to get through the material so they see it once and then they know something. They don't know anything. If you cover it, the joke was, it's like taking a black cloak and covering it. They'll never know it because you've made it impossible for them to ever see it again. But yeah, so the attention thing, if you got 70%, it's not bad. It'd be cool, and clickers are kind of a technology that tends to elicit some data dynamically in the classroom or what's going on. I mean, when I was brand new here, I thought it'd be cool to have like phenol red inside students, so that's a pH coloration that changes to purple, and if it gets alkaline, or changes to yellow if it gets acidic. So if they were learning, it would go purple. If they were not, it would go yellow. And somebody said, you don't want to see the ugliness of what's going on. That everyone changes to yellow within 3 minutes, and purple rarely pops up in your class of 500 ever. But it is liberating. Once you actually are convinced by the literature and other things, it's liberating. That coverage does not work, so you do not have to cover everything because covering doesn't get anywhere. So that's another way to look at this. So don't be depressed that perhaps not much is learned. What else? So we'll do a formal TPS. So all my outline when I write what I'm going to do in a quote lecture is anytime I'm going to stop and do one of those break things, I always fall on TPS as my default, which is this second, so the cards and the TPS, the two take-home messages from the entire workshop. Think about seriously trying to use the cards. It's a challenge because it challenges the students. They don't necessarily love you as a result. TPS, they don't mind TPS. We've been doing it. Think, pair, share. So the idea of think, pair, share is you present a question and everyone thinks individually. So take a moment, think individually, and write down and commit to an answer that you think is accurate. So take a moment individually. So think phase is do it by yourself, individually. So do that now. How do you get a big tree trunk from a little seed? Tiny seed turns into a giant tree. We talked a little about it, but no one learned it. So let's just do it, think, pair, share, formally. So write down your idea, and it can say, I do not know, I don't remember what Rosa said, whatever. All right? So first it's like quiz mode. So we're going to be quiet like it's a quiz, doing it just by ourselves. All right, now we're going to do the pair part. Talk to your neighbor, share ideas, steal their answer, whatever you like. But discuss your reasoning. Why did you pick your answer? So focus on reasoning. Pair, talk to your neighbor.
I know exactly how to plan accurate scientifically.
All right. Now, just to add a little twist to this, so you've had an opportunity to think about it by yourself. You even got to confer with an expert next to you. All right, and so what we'll do is to simplify it, we'll actually go like this. So we're going to look at a tree. We're thinking about what substance builds the tree, and then you're going to actually choose from this. So take a moment to think about which one you prefer to go with personally. And get out your cell phone. We're going to do a text thing. So you're going to text an answer, and I'll show you how. So, but feel free to fire up that phone. So you're going to text to that phone number 1947 and the letter. So take your time. And everyone in the room has the same arbitrarily crappy question wording to work with. Yeah.
Put in 1947.
1947?
Your cell phone, Doug?
Let's see how things are going. Oh, wow. People are paying attention. Like I said, we're X-Men. Right on. But yeah, so yeah, Top Hat is interesting because you use a phone.
I'm sorry I spoiled your example.
No, it's helpful. No, it's cool. It's always, I adore seeing correct answers. So it feels good to see a bar that's long at the right answer. It's such a rare thing. But yeah, so clickers are just generally clickers are cool, and the more you get comfortable with them and the more your students do, the more things you can do with them. I like this clicker because there's no hardware issues. I don't have to plug hardware into my laptop, all that jazz, and they just already have their phones. All clickers have drama, one way or the other. There's always 5%, 1% of the students that something's not working. Doesn't matter which clicker it is or how it's done. And so you just have to go in knowing that, and you can tell them that. They're like, well, wait, I forgot today, I didn't bring it. I'm like, mm-hmm. Or my phone, I'm not getting you, mm-hmm. Okay, it's fine. But for this, Top Hat's reasonably interesting because they have an app. You can text. There's a website. So any device that's on the internet, there's alternatives. So one day a student yelled out, my app's not working. And everybody looked at them and said, text. So there's like a workaround, right? So there's also a cute little attendance thing I hit every day. So an attendance screen comes up and people like, and mostly what's good about that is it gets them to bring out their device and get it going and get it working. So then when you do things, it's actually going to work faster. Yeah?
You don't have any concern about them then being on their phone the entire time?
They are on their phone all the time, no matter what I'm going to do. And actually, if you go observe a class from the back, it's a catastrophe. The stuff that it is a nightmare to watch what happens inside a class. Anthony.
How often do you come across a student who doesn't own a phone?
Oh yeah, occasionally people talk to me, yeah. Yeah, we do that going in where we actually ask people like, does anybody have that issue? It's pretty rare, but it does. Some of the students get track phones, burner phones, and they use that. But they can use a laptop, tablet, because remember, you can just go to the website. This is just a website on a browser. So there is alternatives. So some students bring in like their little mini Fire HD thing or an iPad or a mini something. But yeah, so you don't literally need a phone, but that's what's cool. There's alternative paths. Tell you, man, it's like there's a wind in this room. Other questions just about this stuff? Yeah, Karen.
What do you pay?
Say again?
As the instructor, what do you pay?
Oh, I don't pay anything. Yeah. Yeah, we've done a lot. We've spent a boatload of money on clickers in the past where we bought a bunch of hardware and provided them to students, even back a million years ago where it was infrared. And they, remember MSU, anybody who's been like here forever, MSU added to rooms all these white devices, that receivers on the walls when the first clickers were out, which was cool. This school actually does stuff for you. They actually try to make your rooms work and things like that. But less hardware, less problem, but there's always a little drama going on. It's a class. Other questions? So yeah, in terms of results, it's kind of neat. You can tap and review. In my class, students like to wager. They're always like, it's just like, how many bars, significant bars will it be? And they're like, or somebody's like this, and everybody's going, really? And then doink, and then it's like, the person went like this in this case. Wow, way to go. Good prediction. Anyways. But yeah, the attendance thing looks like this. Blah, blah. Oh, really? I have to take a tutorial? Thank you. I've learned more. I am now finished. There it is. So when a student rolls into the class, they look at it, and you can see it kind of says there's different methods to use to get to Top Hat, but it is cool to have them get ready in this class that's about to start to use your clicker, essentially. And also then I give them, a point every time they attendance in. Mark.
So if you're using this, is there a way that you can associate the phone number with the students so that you know who's, like with the clicker system, you register them so you know who's answered what answer?
Which I believe is what Tina was asking. Yes. Same exact stuff.
You have to do this each day then, or? Okay.
Now, the system learns that that phone and or that app from that person is them. So yeah, it's the same issue with all clickers. It is awesome to have clickers, and then it's even more awesome if the clickers are known to the computer system to be people. So attendance and all those things are, people are being represented. Yeah?
But the attendance code changes each day.
Yeah, now with this, yeah, the cute thing they added with attendance is this, which reminds me of another funny thing of this system. This 8870 can only be seen in the room that day, and it changes. Which is the other feature and bug of this system is it's purely online. So one day one of my students was like, yeah, I was doing clicker questions even though I was absent. I was like, what? So that they just had this loaded on their computer in their room, and when a clicker question popped up, they were like, whoa, and they ran over the computer like, what is the CO2? I'm going with B, submit. So that you don't, so the feature is distance education. You can do clickers everywhere simultaneously. The bug is, wait a minute, you mean you can answer in-class questions when you're not in class? Oh, that's interesting. So that's kind of a cute. Yeah, Marty.
There's a workaround on that, though. If you embed your questions in your PowerPoints, and you can actually run your PowerPoints through Top Hat, then the students can't answer the questions at home. They can only see them.
True. Right, yeah, if you do it, because that's another thing, clicker systems that allow you to use your PowerPoints, and then they just have a cute little toolbar that takes a photograph of whatever was on the screen for that. This company has a similar tool. But yeah, anyway, so clicker's kind of neat. So students do that, and then it disappears, and then I just move around. So you guys are really good. You got that CO2 thing pretty solid. But yeah, so think, pair, share kind of results that way. Now, most commonly, they have to then talk more because we don't have that the dominant single bar was at the right place. We usually have 3 spreads. Students like calling for big spreads, like it's going to be all 5. And that's always interesting because that happens. So if the spread shows it's all over the map, then we do this, where the students actually spend time doing the pair and focusing just on the clicker question itself. And after some short period of time, they redo the question a second time, and they see what happened. So now, so I guess maybe a year ago I did this same workshop, and one of my friends who works upstairs in micro emailed me afterwards and said, yeah, that clicker stuff is cool, but that peer stuff, I don't even think that really works, which is back to the critical question of what works, right? And so that's why in your pack you have a paper from science. So take a moment to just look at this paper from science. So there are a lot of people that spend time coming up with interesting ideas to try to research how effective these techniques are for learning. And when they do elegant things, like traditional researchers, sometimes you end up in science. So the challenge, one of the challenges with what's called peer discussion or this think, pair, share or whatever, is the idea of like student A does not know the answer. Student B tells them the answer. Student A now gets the second time you do the clicker correct, but it has nothing to do with learning. It's just like Marin tells Jessica, it's B. Jessica's like, thanks so much. No learning happened, and so the people were concerned about that this is just BS. This whole happy world where people teach each other and they learn and then we're recording the data, none. So some people were like, actually that'd be intriguing to try to test. And there's kind of cute graphics here, which I think is kind of fun. So figure 1 and 2 are saying sort of the same thing. So they did this interesting, over a whole semester they kept doing this approach to collect a lot of data about students in reasonably large classrooms. So it's like what we just did, right? All the students are in the room, we pose a question. Everybody commits to a certain clicker answer, and they could see that in their case, 52% were associated with the correct answer. You guys had a higher score. And then happily it adds up to 100, 48% were in the incorrect. So then they actually do the discussion right here. So all by yourself, predict the answer by yourself, and then talk to your neighbor occurs here. AD is after discussion. So that these arrowheads is people talking to each other. Then they ask the same question again. And you can see the real life going on. Some of the people that got it correct, bloop, got it wrong when they did it again. But most stayed correct. But check it out. Of the 48% that were totally on the wrong thing, nearly half of them end up being correct. So this is where the question becomes like, did they just somehow figure from a neighbor over here what the right answer was, and some are still incorrect. So what this group kept doing was, later on in the class, they'd ask a different question on the exact same concept. So it's about photosynthesis, it's about CO2, worded differently. If our original question was about seals that did things, this one's about like birds. And all you got to do is change a little context, and it's a different question entirely to the student. And then they did this again and again. And what was intriguing was what happens here, where like people with nobody else, so there's no discussion. This is an isolated question that the learning actually promotes. And you can see that in the bars. So what they're showing is that on average, this many got it correct by themselves. That number went up after discussion. On the question later that's all by themselves, the number is even higher. And they looked at the type of clicker question, because people were like, yeah, but it ain't for hard questions, just cake questions. Turns out, the hard questions had the best impact of the process. So there was gains that were significant with really challenging questions. So it's an intriguing little research study that sort of supports the students teaching each other is effective and really takes hold, even if 20 minutes later there's another all by yourself question. The person who sort of was thinking about it with another student and still's thinking about it, they can actually move to a correct answer. So that's a nice little science paper. Love science. It's only like 3 pages long. And, but it's an elegant study done by some really smart folks. But yeah.
Sorry, were there tutorials where they didn't do the discussion?
Yeah, so check out the paper. Yeah, they're way smarter than I am. So it's a good research groups, and they have a bunch of follow-up papers. This one's, what year is it?
2009.
This is 09. So yeah, you can follow forward. But yeah, so after talk to your neighbor, there's usually another opportunity to click, and then share. So another thing in think, pair, share that tends to be often left out is share. So clicker questions where it's like think, click, and then click again, and then we're moving on. Share is actually pretty powerful. And Tammy Long, who works on campus here, really convinced me that share is something to keep track of, keep thinking about. The opportunity of students to say aloud, once again, what happened in the process when they talk to their neighbor, to actually stand up. So the researchers that actually did this and other talked about one key word to say when you ask students to talk to their neighbor is to discuss or present to your neighbor your reasoning. So using the word reasoning actually helped the discussion be a little bit more on point. The other thing is in share, Tammy always asks somebody to talk about how they first were thinking about this, and then if they changed, why. And then a student will say, yeah, initially I was thinking it was A, but then we started talking about the fact that carbon is the molecule that builds all the sugars, and we remembered, oh right, it is CO2. So that their sharing is actually very powerful for other students in the classroom. So do not neglect the S in the TPS. For time purposes, you often can choose to do things faster or slow, but keep it in mind. I think, what was it? Eric Mazur at Harvard talks about that he has a system that after he navigates learning with the device, right? So if he detects that very few people understand what he just talked about for the last 10 minutes, he'll then talk about it some more because he gets it. But he has very stringent numbers. Like if greater than 70-something people got it right, he doesn't move on because he doesn't think he's going to move that higher by putting 5 minutes. And if less than something like 30% or something got it right, he doesn't do additional instruction because they're not prepared to learn more. So he has very stringent kind of rigorous about use of time. And so the click, it's if you're in the sweet spot of the middle, then he'll return to the topic and spend more time on it, and do things like share. But it's because it's that whole bookends model where you really only have about 3, 4, 5 minutes that you want to commit, and then you got to keep moving. Yep, question.
Is the share different concept from the reviewing or evaluation of the whole student?
So say it again.
Is the share is the last part of these 3 TPS?
Right. So share is the last part. Yeah.
So I just is it different from the reviewing the results?
Oh, is it different than just talking about what the right answer is? To some degree, right? Because it's probably because different person is doing it. So in share, you want them to talk about what they came up with in the process, by why they thought of it, and the process of talking to their neighbor and how that helped them. We often just then talk about what the right answer is. My students hate me because I never tell them the right answer. I always put the clicker questions online, but they have to work it out. Yeah. So, but yeah, so there is a subtle difference between share. They share with each other verbally in class versus just us saying, yeah, CO2 is the right answer. Share is done. So, good question. And since we have no audio, I'll assume I can't do that. So let's do this. So take a moment to read through stuff we could do, and then we'll put up a clicker and you guys can pick. See if the data looks different than it did before. Oh, it's different. Oh, wet experiment is winning. All right. Get your final opportunity votes in if you want to do something different. Concept maps is a runner-up. It's fighting, but it looks like wet experiment. All right, let's try it out. Pink. Did it change? Oh, it's coming. Yeah. People were fighting. I was like, hey, if you didn't get in, get in. And if you're on the wet, get back. Wet's fun. We can do the concept maps after. Boosh. All right, let's do the wet experiment. Let's see what it looks like. This is cool. Yeah. All right, so you have to form a group of 4. So you guys are good, right? All right. So Ty, hang out with these dudes. So then these guys are a group of 4 right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. So you guys introduce yourselves. Got a group of 4. You can be a group of 5. What the heck? Group of 5. There's a group of 4. All right, they're breaking. That's cool. Another group of 4. Perfect. Right there. Right. So yep, group of 4. Maybe a pair. Then a group of 4. Y'all good. All right. You just have to function as 2 people.
Which part of the birthday is important? The month, the day, or the year?
Month and day.
Okay, good. Please go with month and day.
Yeah. All right. So say hello and then write down your birthday, month and day. Go ahead. First task.
So I think we're probably going to get together.
Donating these to the group.
So just do what we want.
There's no instructions here.
It's safe.
Oh, cool.
The red grape is much more reactive to carbonation.
Much happier.
It is.
The green grape is just sitting there.
Yeah.
It wants to jump on it.
Way better to have multiple grapes than just one grape type. Yeah. We're going to have to just pause. We're going to pause the experiments for a moment. We're just going to pause. Don't worry, you can still play with your grapes. We're just going to pause. By the way, they're tasty in soda pop. It's an extra bonus to just be aware of grapes in Sprite. Magnifico. Anyways, so first, random feedback in terms of your experiment. What did you discover? What is your analysis? What additional experiments did your group perform to try to figure out what was going on? So Marty's going to split the deck.
Kevin Elliott.
That's always fun when somebody in one team picks another member of that team. Yeah. Students like that too.
Well, my teammates can help me here, but so of course, in terms of our initial experiment testing it out, our grapes and water sank, and our grapes and the soda pop floated, and so then we started wondering, if it had to do with all the carbon dioxide bubbles forming on the grapes and providing the buoyancy, and so then our teammates came up with a really good idea of peeling them to see if maybe the bubbles wouldn't adhere quite as much after they were peeled, and sure enough, they did stay down at the bottom after that. So then my more scientifically expert colleagues, had a lot of impressive things to say about the microtexture of the skin, that the carbon dioxide, and the surface tension, that it didn't adhere as well as the peels on. Others can say more intelligent things.
Excellent. As a reporter for the group, good job, group. Interesting damage done to the grapes. They do look a little harmed there. But yep. All right. Excellent. Let's pick another one. All right. So Cecilia, split the deck.
Christine Getter.
Is Kristen Getter? All right. Going back there. Oh, they're going to mic you up. You get to yell like a rock star into the mic.
We hypothesized the same thing, that the carbon dioxide was holding the grapes up. But so what we did is we tried to get the carbon dioxide out of the soda by making it flat, pouring it back and forth.
You were aerating like wine.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they sink.
Yeah.
Now they sink.
How'd that work out?
It worked.
Yeah. Eureka. Good job. All right. From a volunteer. Anyone else want to volunteer? Well, our group kind of went a different direction. Anyone? Other things you want to volunteer? Yeah, over here.
We noticed that our
Yeah, good, because then the mic with loud actually works.
We noticed that our red grapes were floating a little bit more diligently than our green grapes, so we decided to split them open and see if the seeds inside made a difference. And we noticed the seeds themselves floated in while the grapes didn't. So then we kind of tried to figure out.
So they did a seed extraction. They have like seeds, wet seeds on their bench top. Nice. Seeds. Oh, over here, some ideas. Additional sharing.
I'm Jamil. I worked with Bill, Chad, and Janice.
Good job.
And so we didn't come up with a concrete experiment, but we discussed several observations. And the one that caught our attention primarily was the turning behavior of the grapes. And so that led to a discussion about the shape of the grapes and how the turning behavior, the speed, and how what axis the grapes turned on was influenced by that shape.
Yeah, that's cool. So you want to just say you've used it in your class? So Janice shared with me.
So I teach an animal behavior class, and to get the students started with thinking about how to observe and record animal behavior, I actually started with the grapes. Because the grapes are reliable, they don't get shy when there's 50 students staring at them, I don't have animal use forms to fill out. You can do things like dissect them and peel them, and nobody's going to object. So I get them started with this at the beginning of the semester, and actually our soda usually goes flat by the end of the lab because we talk about it so long, and so they watch some of those changes happen kind of naturally too. Yeah, I make them record. They end up doing scan samples of behavior and recording frequencies and durations and all kinds of other things too. So it works really well.
Cool. Anyone else have something, your experience that you can share to throw out there? Another twist or turn? Yep.
Okay, so yeah, another hypothesis we made is the role of the sugar.
Oh yeah, good. Sugar.
That make the solution more dense.
Right. Yeah, that's a good variable.
We need the control to just the water with sugar, water with sugar but no carbon.
Right, so yeah, you'd like to have additional fluids to work with. Water with sugar, bubbles without sugar, you know. So yeah, so then you could really develop a system. So, and then you could combine work, because one group has good evidence that the surface of this moon has some properties when removed, and then you could do the negations of whether osmotic strength is really also playing any roles. It's good stuff. But yeah, so this type of activity is just sort of a nice model of what you can do. And it was good Janice could share kind of a neat, actually probably a more interesting one that I might use, because I use this have to do with just what is a hypothesis, and to start thinking, have students thinking about what's a hypothesis and how to design an experiment, stuff like that. It's much cooler to have animal behavior, because the purple grape is the cutest little thing spinning around there. And it is true that, like in physiology, everything is like, does it increase, decrease, and stay the same? But the other layer is short-term, long-term. And so this experiment, just like she mentioned, if it's sitting there and then you do something for a while, it starts changing. Where like at a certain point, often the green grapes submerge even in the soda pop. And the purple grape is still up there dancing. So now there's another thing differentiating them. And people start talking about the actual shape, spheres versus elongated footballs, and whether that makes a difference in behavior. So I guess we're wrapping. We were supposed to go to 1:30. Any questions before you run away? Yep.
So,
one thing I struggle with is kind of minimizing, I guess, the chaos of it. Because there's lots of active things I'd like to do, but then how do I kind of keep track of all of them, keep the students from losing track of which things we're doing when, and then integrate them into actual grades and assessments. So do you have a strategy that you use in terms of going about this?
I don't know. Does anyone here have a thought on that? Because these things often get chaotic, and this is a perfect example, right? If you do this. Yeah, Ty, what do you think?
So I don't do small experiments like this, but I do a lot of think, fair, share style questions. And I'm a big believer in not making them for part of a formal assessment, because I think that sets up a sort of confrontational dynamic there. So what I do is I say over the course of the semester, participation in the clicker questions is worth a certain amount of extra credit, which also has the side benefit that I have an easy out when they're whining about I'm only half a point shy of whatever grade cut off, because I can say, well, either you got the extra credit so you're over it, or you're only that close because of the extra credit, so you're not really that close anyway. Either way, go away.
Other thoughts?
I just say go away no matter what.
That's another way of doing it, yeah.
You can also do it so that they are for points, but you can make 80% be 100%.
Yeah.
So that they have some kind of leeway there.
Yeah. Yeah, and everybody behaves differently or handles them differently.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if you're doing a bunch of them in a lecture, you could just choose one that's kind of the points for the day.
Right.
And then they don't know if it's gonna be the first 5 minutes or the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, right. And it is beautiful to have techniques that make students want to be at class at the very start and still be at class at the very end. Because one of my colleagues once said, Fridays, there's no even reason to have classes. Students never show up. And another colleague's like, I could fix that. So, but yep, so I think we'd be done, and you are now free to have a life.